welcome back to the Your Forest podcast. This is episode 12, and it's going to be a little lighter than the last couple. We've been getting pretty serious into the content, so I got Derrick on again, Derrick Kreger-Smith, and we're just going to bullshit our way through some stuff. It's going to be interesting. Last one was pretty ridiculous, so this will be good. It's good.
Yeah, always happy to be your last resort.
Hey, you offered this one, man.
I did.
I was just working. You're like, hey, let's do a podcast.
I have
Absolutely.
attention needs, so your podcast is a lovely platform to fill
It's
that
been
gap.
good, man. I've been loving this. This has been so much fun. But yeah, I've been sorry the podcasts have been kind of sporadic. They haven't been all over. They've been all over the place because I've had some other priorities to take care of for the podcast. But there's a bunch of stuff coming. It's just about confirming dates and making sure that everybody can be in the same place at the same time and everything's going to work. And I don't want to give a subpar product. So, yeah.
It's hard not to take that as a personal attack. I'm sitting right here, a subpar product.
I wouldn't be recording this if you thought you were a subpar product, Derek.
Okay, well, I think I'm a subpar
Take
product.
that as a pat as a shoulder.
I feel this whole thing is a charity effort, but I accept it.
Yeah, people find you funny. It's all good.
Oh. Okay.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Yeah,
Anyway.
I just definitely have one of those moments.
Yeah, okay.
What have you been up to?
So, yeah, Derek we were talking, and I was trying to figure out something that me and him could talk about again. And he did a Reddit Ask Me Anything. If for people who don't know, Reddit is just a social media platform where people can ask other people basically anything. You just post stuff, and there's comments and all that. So he didn't ask me anything. He said, I'm a forest technician in the province of Alberta, or something like that, right?
Yeah,
And
I just said, ask me anything. I'm
ask me anything. So
forest tech in the province of Alberta.
he printed off a bunch of the relevant questions. There was a lot of ridiculous questions, supposedly. Like the first one example was, do you like depressed wildflowers?
Yeah,
So
apparently.
that's a Monty Python reference.
Yeah, which I didn't know, and I legitimately answered the question like, "Oh yeah,
I'm
I had
a lumberjack
class."
and I don't care. or whatever.
Yeah.
However he goes, yeah.
No, I felt very foolish because I didn't get the reference.
So if you want to see something hilarious, look up
Don't
Monty
look it up.
Python lumberjack song because it is wonderful.
It is kind of great, actually.
That's pretty good. Did you see it? Did you watch it after?
Yeah, I watched like the opening of it. I've heard probably the first 30 seconds, a
You
dozen
just
times.
got over it.
I don't know.
Not into British humor?
No, I've watched some of the skit stuff. Actually, it was like Robin Hood Men in Tights and Princess's Bride and stuff was some of the first satire that I've seen. And so watching Monty Python, I was like, oh, this is like Robin Hood Men in Tights, when in actuality it's the other way. So
Yeah.
I kind of got the order backwards, but
Yeah, John Cleese, the original OG.
oh yeah.
Yep.
Oh, so funny.
Anyways, so yeah, so we're just gonna sit down and kind of talk about some of these questions. Some of them are funny, some of them are pretty legitimate. I can't claim to know all of the answers exactly like that. I don't have the best answers for these questions, but I do have answers that will, help people.
I gave a lot
understand
of
what's
links
going on.
out.
Yeah.
I was like, for more information about your request, please see this huge directory of the government website. 'Cause
Yeah.
I don't know that.
There's a lot of stuff on the government website, the province of Alberta. Yeah, for sure. So, like one of the first ones was like, in the province of Alberta, how much is actually logged, and in what ways do you choose which areas are going to undergo logging?
Yeah.
So that's something we've kind of addressed, I guess, a little bit in the past, but it's still a relevant question, obviously. So I was trying to find exact numbers on how much is actually logged relative to how much is still standing, and it's hard to find. There's like, I know how many like hectares of forest there is, and then but then it talks about lumber and like product in cubic meters, so they're not really relative.
Yeah, it's
So
hard
it's
to break cubic meters back to like individual trees or even a surface area.
I'm sure if I spent enough time on it, if this wasn't like a last, like hour and a half ago decided to make this podcast, I probably would have done a little bit more research and got the right answers for this, but
I definitely bullied you into it.
it's all good. I'm down with this. But anyway, anyways, like there's actually in 2010 I found a report that was given by the government. In 2010 in Alberta there was 21 million cubes cut.
That's significant.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
But it's still relative to the amount that's still in the land base, it's next to nothing. Like it'll be less than it'll be roughly a rough number, would be like roughly 1% of the merchantable timber that's out there.
Yeah,
merchantable being the key word.
Merchantable being key. That's excluding your bogs and stuff like adjacent to creeks and large water features. There's buffers around lakes and recreational areas.
Yeah,
provincial parks, like all of that gets gets opted out of merchantable.
But it's like we talked about before. I guess like the appropriate answer, what that person's probably asking is, like, kind of, is it sustainable? And yes, it is. So it's all right. Like that's the first thing.
We're not
we learned.
overcutting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of modeling that goes into this. There's a lot of research, and we're very aware of the growth rate of the forest. And what we actually do is we only cut what has been grown. So every year they have growth models, and they use that to interpret how much they can cut, as well as using information from like disturbance events like fires or windstorms and stuff like that, or cut blocks even come out of their land base temporarily until they get to a certain growth rate, so they know that they're actually coming back to the forest and they're not just
a barren desert.
They don't need extra work or whatever. But it's sustainable. It's definitely sustainable. We're cutting the growth, so in theory it should all just be continuous. We shouldn't be losing any kind of ground. There's no deforestation happening. It's all continuous. It's sustainable, and like I said in the past, it's the only truly sustainable building resource we have on the planet. I actually found I'm going to pull that thing up again. Actually, I found another document. This was 2016, I think. Oh, damn it.
Yeah, so that was comparing wood to concrete and steel.
Yeah.
In terms of a few different values.
Yeah, I took a picture of it here. Just give me 1 second. There we go. Okay. So they're comparing wood to steel and concrete as far as its like energy efficiency, greenhouse gases emitted, and all that. So for steel consumes 12% more energy than wood does. This is like a unit per unit basis. These are in line. It's not like they're using 10 tons of steel and like a ton of wood. It's like they're equivalent amounts. Yeah. So consumes 12% more energy. Steel emits 15% more greenhouse gases, and it releases 10% more pollutants into the air, and then it generates 300% more water pollutants.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So it's significantly right. And then not to say it's
that's just mining in general has a water impact.
Yeah. And concrete is like similar, worse in some ways. So concrete consumes 20% more energy. It emits 29% more greenhouse gases, releases 12% more pollutants into the air, and generates 225% more water pollutants. So
when compared to wood.
So it's very clear that like if you want to go with sustainability, like wood is that's what you want to go with. But
if you want to go for like minimal ecological impact, it's wood.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the original part of the question is how much you cutting, how do you pick? And you answered that with we're cutting a sustainable amount that doesn't incur any deforestation on the land base, and we use modeling from vegetation inventories to decide what gets cut, and that removes the human bias of only wanting to cut the most productive or the most well-growing stands, and it forces you to cut stuff that might be even a little bit less profitable.
Yep. Oh,
so
yeah,
just to make sure the land base gets refreshed in order. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so we're not like, so high grading is a word that people use to say that we went out and cut the biggest, most productive trees, and that's not what we do at all. We don't just cut the oldest trees. Like that's a little bit of a misconception as well. Like people think that we go out when we're always cutting the oldest trees and letting the younger ones catch up to that, and that's not true at all. We cut a lot of trees that are in the like 75 to 85, 95, 100 year range, and like old growth I would consider to be probably 120 and older. And like they do cut some of that, but relative to the amount on the land base, they're cutting the same amount of old growth that will be turning into old growth like the following year. Like it's the same, like there's supposed to be the same proportion of old growth and younger growth and medium. It's like there's more specific terms obviously, but for public consumption it's kind of so there's supposed to be the same proportion of types and age types of trees and stands on the landscape for infinitum. It's always supposed to be the same. So we're not just cutting all the old growth and waiting for the younger stuff to get up to it. We're cutting all ranges. That's a bit of a misconception. So,
and I've seen that put into action by the mill. So the Drayton Valley mill, they retrofitted their mill and they put in a new line specifically to deal with small diameter wood as an inefficiency. So so they can divert all their small diameter wood onto that specific line to be processed because their modeling is showing they're going to be into quote unquote less productive stands, and so they're expecting to bring in smaller diameter, still merchantable, like still, again, they wouldn't be in there if it wasn't merchantable, but it is small diameter. So they're not going for this old growth spruce. They're going for, just merchantable pine, probably black spruce component to it, kind of your 5Bs, like touching on your 7Bs. So
that makes sense.
So so industry has to work within the modeling. It has to work within kind of the agreed upon harvest format.
Yeah, industry's they're not cutting off their own foot. They need it to be sustainable too, just to keep profits up, let alone maintaining the integrity of the landscape and the ecology of the landscape, right? So there's a million different reasons why nobody's deforesting or just high grading anything, because it doesn't make sense on a multitude of levels. So but what you're saying ties into like another question further down. Someone asks, what do you do with non-economic species? Are they amassed into slash piles? Like, they want to know what we do with them when, like, so there's, I think what he's saying is that when you cut a block, the non-economic species, do you still cut them, throw them into slash piles, or what do you do with them? And a lot of it now is just left. It's left standing as, like, if it's considered to be, it'll stay standing. We don't cut it like an individual tree in the middle of it and just like let it fall down later, right? So like, if it's considered to be a non-economic pocket within the block, they'll actually leave that pocket alone. Like, for example, there's a lot of times you get black spruce bogs right in the middle, like a really small one.
Just a little pit in the ground that holds water.
And they're not going to cut that. They're going to leave that alone. But the other non-economic stuff. So like the understory, for example, a lot of that now we do understory protection. So there's different types of cuts being done. There's where they, instead of just doing a clear cut, they'll actually cut the overstory species and leave the understory conifer species there to grow. So they get a head start on growth rather than starting from planting. They're starting from a 30-year or 15-year head start. So that's a big jump for them. And also they're maintaining all kinds of complexity on the landscape that way. Rather than starting from like a burn approach where it would just be, it's all flat.
It's a different biodiversity, so it's going to support different other plants and other wildlife and other things.
So they leave it. They leave it. And like, some of it does get slashed because sometimes you can't avoid, you're cutting one merchantable that's literally an inch away from the other one. Like, they're both going to get cut down. So some of that gets thrown into a slash pile or something like that. But they have to be pretty small, like non-merchantable sizes. Do you remember the actual like butt sizes for non-merchantable? I think 15 centimeter.
It's somewhere around there.
Is that 15 centimeter bottom or tops?
Top.
15 centimeter top.
I feel like it's 15 centimeter top.
That's pretty small. So probably,
Think about like a 2x4 or 2x6 you use for a stud, right?
I'm gonna figure that out.
It varies by mill, so it depends what product you're making. I mean, you even get some of those added plus value plus products, right? So they'll take really small diameter stuff because they have a specific line where it goes off, and they turn it into slats and shims and window framing and baseboards and other thin small diameter stuff, or even dowels or whatever. They can
there's a million different things they can do with it, or they can just turn it into. You can turn them into pellets, or they can turn them into, like, for MDF, you can use them for all kinds of things, right? I can't find, I forget. I apologize. I don't know what the exact minimum butt size is, but the non-economic trees, they're not wasted.
They're generally not cut down, because as soon as you cut a tree down, you have an obligation to that pot of land to reforest it. So why would you go through the effort of cutting down something that you can't make money on and then pay to put those trees back on the ground? Like, you lose money twice.
It doesn't make any sense.
So industry tends to avoid them just in general.
For sure. All right, and then what else we got? Are there any invasive species within Alberta?
So many.
So there's lots, and this person specifically was asking about like insects, like the emerald ash borer and Asian longhorn beetle. The Asian longhorn beetle, I was mistaken. It sounds like the Asian longhorn beetle is a different species than the one we have in Alberta. The one we have in Alberta is we call it a Sawyer beetle, but it looks a lot like the Asian longhorn beetle.
Similar,
and I'm pretty sure the Sawyer beetle is native. The Asian longhorn beetle and the emerald ash borer are in Ontario. And sounds like they've got a handle on what's going on over there. But the Asian longhorn sounded like it was causing them some serious problems for a while. But
comes in on freight.
From China,
like cargo and stuff.
But there's all kinds of invasive species in Alberta, especially plants. Like, plants are a big one. any roadside plant that you see, if you're driving through like any road really, whether it's a highway or a bush road or a logging road or whatever, basically all those plants you see in the ditch, those are all invasives.
Even just like railroads, like
Yeah,
in the
railroads
gravel
too.
and stuff, you
Yeah.
find
They're all invasive species.
Yeah.
Like there's lots of clovers that are in there. There's all kinds of stuff.
there's
Grasses that
Canada
are.
thistle, there's everything.
Yeah, there's Canada thistle. Yeah,
Which is
kind of
yeah,
oxymoron. Eh?
yeah, I know. It's like yeah, it'd be like
Invasive
cool.
name, Canada thistle. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's tons of invasives, and like I don't even know. I can't even go into the list of them because there's a lot.
If you're really interested and you want to keep your eye out for invasive species, your best bet is to go and do a search. So find out what the invasive species are in your area, in your province, in your state, wherever you happen to be listening from, and then learn like what identifies them and where they're commonly found. So some of them really like to favor creek beds because they're really big in taking up moisture. They can dry out creek beds and stuff. And then your region may have control programs. So maybe there's an advantage if you're out on a nature walk and you notice this invasive species. Maybe there's a reporting function for your area, and then they can send out crews to try to control them, or goats or something, try to eat them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Just do some research. Go do a Google. Find out. Get involved.
Do a Google.
Do a Google.
Use a Google machine.
Yeah. Worship at the Google machine.
That's good. I know we're supposed to be answering these questions, but
Well, my answer to your question is to direct you to the correct resources.
somebody that knows what's up.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I could do. Yeah, I could have spent. I could
I
go
can
through these
read
questions.
80 plants off a list.
Yeah,
It
but it's not
doesn't
gonna-
really help you.
No, it's not going to mean anything to you. So,
Yeah.
Anyways, next one was riparian buffers. Like, do we have riparian buffers? Yeah, we do have riparian buffers.
So many.
Yeah, Derek did layout for a while, so we can talk about that.
Yep. So so there's different classifications of water bodies, and they get different buffers. So depending on the width of the channel, you get a different buffer. So if I think ours was 0.4 to 1 meters, was it considered an intermittent creek?
Yeah, they changed it all now. Now it's like there's a transitional. So there's a
Yeah, the TSP, transitional small perm.
yeah.
Yeah, we had that too.
Okay, because that's I think the intermittent is 4 to point. Oh shit! I forget.
Over the net for the channel width.
They changed the channel width. Yeah.
Okay.
Because they're ephemeral, which is basically just just a
Just a
spring.
wet draw.
Yeah. it's
Usually no channel, no rocky bottom.
No, there's no channel. It's basically just grass and stuff, and there's water coming
Yeah,
over. It's
wet
generally
moss
in the
maybe.
spring, right?
Yep.
And then there's intermittent streams, which are
Very thin, small channels of flowing water.
yeah.
Probably too narrow to carry most fish species.
You'd be surprised.
I'm probably
yeah.
well in spring and stuff. Like,
Oh, there's a
nothing's off
lot
the table,
of fish,
yeah.
and like they'll if there's like there's places where people have said like with an inch of water fish will get through. Like they go crazy places. So their fish are everywhere.
Okay.
If there's a stream, chances are there's fish in it.
Right.
There might not be a ton, but they're in there. But yeah, the intermittent was what was the measurement? You said?
10. Typically 10.
There's 10 meter buffers.
Yeah.
And then the small perms are a meter to 5 meters, right?
For buffer or for width?
No, for the width. The width of the
Yeah, up
channel
to
is 1
5
meter
meters.
to 5 meters.
Up to 5 meters.
Yeah. And the buffer is 30 meter buffer. So that's on both sides. So it ends up being 30 meters on
It ends
each
up
side.
being 60 plus the width of the channel.
Yeah, and then there's large perms, which are greater than 5 meters.
Yeah.
Right. That's the high water mark for those measurements.
Mhm.
Not at where the water is, but where the water would be at the highest point in the year. So generally spring runoff.
Yeah.
But those are
100.
Yeah, 100.
100. Yep.
100 from the high water mark. Yeah. And then lakes.
I think are 200, I want to say.
I think they're 100, aren't they?
They might be 100. I might be confusing them with Trumpeter Swan Lake specifically.
Trumpeter swans are like,
They get a bigger buffer. I think they get, I want to say 200.
man, we're full of useful information today.
It varies.
We got into this
It can
slightly
vary.
unprepared.
But at any rate, there are buffers where no machines are allowed to process wood. So it's not even like a reach-in thing. Where,
Yeah.
Oh, if I can reach in with the length of the feller buncher or the excavator, then I can get it. No, you can't touch it. And that's to preserve the greater vegetation, which is your trees, but also your lesser vegetation, which is your grass, your shrubs, and all
Moss.
of that, your moss. All of that's going to catch water that hits it, and it's going to slow the water down, which drops the soil out of the water.
Mhm.
And that's going to deposit the material in the tree line and stop that material from hitting the waterway, which is where, if you get dirt and you get sediment in the waterway, that's where it's affecting fish populations and it's affecting their ability to spawn and all the rest of it. So
Yeah.
keeping that buffer is really important for the water quality and keeping our numbers
That's somebody I
way
get
better
on.
than concrete and steel for,
Yeah.
water pollution.
Well, I have to get somebody on that really knows the science behind the buffers and like why they're there and the like how it affects water quality and like the habitat in there for not just for fish but for
So the other ways it helps with habitat, I know a little bit about this.
yeah.
There is sheltering from the trees themselves, so that's providing shade and that's helping to keep the water temperature reasonably regulated, which is
Right.
important because you don't want the water to heat up because that affects fish populations as
more
well.
animal. Not just fish though. We're talking about like super small bugs and
It can stop with blooms too if your water gets too warm.
algae.
And that affects how well aerated it can be as well. Temperature affects the aeration.
Right.
The other thing is insect populations. Having those plants and those trees and other parts of the ecosystem around keeps your insects local,
Right.
which allows your fish populations and other things to feed.
Yeah.
And then there's what's the other big one?
Well, it's a travel corridor for ungulates, for all not just ungulates but all mammals, right?
So it just leave an untouched corridor around it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was fine before. It should be fine after.
Yeah. So so right now we do have buffers. We're protecting water resources. That's a huge one. It's a huge part of the forest management planning. It's definitely not ignored. Yeah. Cool. We're flying through these questions actually.
Yeah.
What's your favorite tree, Derek?
Oh, don't
Tree species.
Didn't we? I feel like we talked about this once.
Did you?
I forget.
My favorite. I don't know about.
Oh, I asked Derek. I had this conversation with Derek in the
did
field.
you? Fisher.
Yeah, I think he was waffling between cedar and another good smell tree. It's like cedar or fir, maybe.
Balsam fir.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know
it's
that's
pretty good smell.
Yeah, it's a good smell. It's a good tree too.
Oh man, when I was elk hunting, I was walking through a pine block, and every day there was this one pine tree I had to kind of like move out of the way. Just a little sapling. It had a little bit of damage. It was bent over, and I had to move it out of the way. And I would get the sap on my hand, and I would just sit there like smelling my hand as I was walking down.
Yeah,
the
you're not a weirdo.
because it was so good. Spent 7 days in the
Just
bush with a
huffing
bunch
nature.
of dudes that are sweaty and hairy, and just like we can't even like I don't even smell anymore after that because it just that whole place just stinks.
Ugh.
I don't want to know. If you walked into those camps fresh, you'd be
Ooh.
deterred big
Oh,
time.
for sure.
It's not.
It'd be like the whole thing smells like a gym bag, even though I'm
Yeah.
standing outside in fresh air.
Yeah,
Yeah,
7
oof.
days of no showers,
Not-
sweating, walking all day in the sun.
Not good.
It's a good time. So yeah, pine smells amazing.
I love your bar. It's like, wow, this pine is giving me everything.
I was so jacked about that pine. It was awesome. No, they smell so good. Honestly, every day I would purposely put my hand on the bud, on the terminal bud, and just like yeah, it smells good.
Did you ever like rub the dirt on the sap and stop it from sticking? Do you know that trick?
Yeah.
I think everybody figures that out when they're a kid. Most of us. I remember the first time we did it at Nate. Someone reached down.
Now
and
you're
they rubbed
making
their
people
hands.
feel bad.
Well, okay. Well, I remember someone reached down and they were rubbing their hands with dirt, and I was like, "Why are you doing that?" And they're like, "Oh, I got sap on my hand." I'm like, "That totally works." And
Yeah.
everyone was like, "I've done that too." And it was just kind of this thing a lot of us had figured
Also,
out.
it's the only thing available in the vicinity for you to rub your hands on. So it's probably not a like, oh, that works. It's probably like, well, shit, that's all I got, so I'm going with dirt.
I'm going for dirt. Yeah,
and it happens to work. So
it happens to work. Yeah, no.
yeah.
So yeah,
My favorite one. Well, I don't know about like species. Like I really like Doug fir, but as far as stands to walk through, lodgepole pine stands, man. Walking through lodgepole pine stands, there's something
Yeah.
about those stands. They're almost picturesque because they're clean on the bottom.
Mhm.
Not a lot of
no
understory.
shrub,
just-
A density,
yeah.
big pumpkin pine.
See a long ways, and they're just those are nice.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite stands. Favorite species. Doug fir is pretty sweet.
My favorite stand is very similar, but it's spruce. If you've ever been in those pumpkin white spruce,
Yeah.
but it's like a lawn.
By pumpkin,
It looks
you
like
mean, big.
I mean,
ass.
big,
Yeah.
large diameter pumpkin. And it's just like a lawn of moss.
Yeah.
And oh my God, I remember when I've been in them. I've been in two. And I remember when I did lay out on one, I hit it and I was just like, oh, I just stopped and looked around. Like it's so rare to just have like no shrubs and no
Yeah.
grass and just be able to see. Like
Yeah.
and it is self-pruned all its lower branches and stuff.
Yeah.
So I could just see.
There's something pretty cool about that. It's definitely like a second to like take a step back and kind of appreciate it, right? Like
Yeah.
there was a stand close to town where it was like a 7C. It was a large kind of white spruce stand, so like a little bit wetter, but all these trees they had at 4 feet tall. There was no branches underneath any of them. It was from the deer.
Oh wow.
The
yeah.
deer were bedding down in there and stuff, but it was probably like a 2 hectare area of all these spruce trees that were like dense, right? They're covering like 80% crown closure, so you can't see much of the ground. And at 4 feet, there's absolutely at 4 feet and below, there's no trees. You could just like duck down and like hustle through all that. It was just weird.
That's
because it had clearly
weird.
been broken off.
Yeah.
From like animals and stuff, right? It looked like it had almost been pruned, like someone had gone through and pruned out all the branches. But it was just that was interesting.
That is it would feel like a playhouse or
It was weird.
like a jungle gym. Or
and they weren't that
some sort
old
of, like,
trees. Like they were maybe like 30-year-old trees or 40-year-old trees,
bizarre.
right? So, but yeah,
It's anytime you see clean lines and clean features in the forest,
yeah,
it's very puzzling and usually really pretty to look at
yeah,
because it doesn't happen.
yeah.
So yeah, anytime you get those clean lines, like
It's
4
nice.
foot and down,
Yeah.
it's just, yeah.
It's kind of cool. What else we got here? How does it feel to be awesome? Apparently, Reddit says.
Yeah. They asked me how does it feel to be
Thanks.
awesome.
Give
And
yourself a pat on the back.
You know what's it's funny. So we were at Nate, and sometimes we had to go on labs, and we'd have all our gear on. So we'd have our vests, we'd have our hard hats, we'd be carrying like an axe because we were going falling, and we needed something to drive wedges. We'd have our full boots and like all totally kitted out. And then we'd walk through the main campus of Nate
Yeah.
because for whatever reason we had to go. So we're just walking through. Everyone else has got like book bags and like a messenger bag and their cup of coffee from whatever the cafeteria. We're walking through like we're surveying a mall.
We're
And,
lumberjack and we don't care.
And I actually heard this in the hallway once. Someone like far behind me, they said, "There go those forestry badasses," and I was like, "Yeah, you're damn fucking right." And I was like, "My job is awesome. I am about to go and spend an entire day cutting down trees for practice and education and safety, and like I'm gonna learn all this awesome stuff.
Chainsaw's the
And
best.
you're gonna go fall asleep in a statistics class." I was like, "You're right. You're not wrong." So yeah, it feels really good to be awesome.
Yeah. I'm glad you answered that question because I couldn't have done it. I was gonna go right past it, but I felt like you had an answer for it.
Oh yeah. Humility. What's that?
Okay. Some other guy wanted to know about pine beetle. Hasn't made its way into Alberta yet.
Yep.
Do we have plans if it does?
Yep.
Do we have strategically laid out cut blocks to try and create break lines to slow or stop the spread?
Yep.
So this was 4 years ago. So this was kind of
This was earlier in the pine beetle conversation.
So in Alberta, it's slowed down a lot. Pine beetle's always there. This is a misconception as well. People think that, people might have the thought that these insect populations that take out forest species are just all of a sudden they're there. It's like the media makes it seem that way, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, like all of a sudden the pine beetle's here. Like what a horrible thing. It's like, no, the pine beetle has always been there. It's a native species. It's always been consuming pine. But they go through their population dynamics. They go through, ups and downs just like everything does. Only their ups and downs are much more drastic.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's like 10 forest caterpillar.
yeah, and
The big population years because there's no leaves
It's
on
like
the
every
tree.
7 years or something like that.
It's around Athabasca, right?
Well, yeah, like around like Slave Lake, Athabasca, there's lots, but it's everywhere, like in the Peace region, and like when it comes up, like I think 3 years ago it came up, and it was nuts.
Yeah, it's gross.
It was a lot. Like you're walking through a forest, like in The Hobbit, where there's like all those spider webs everywhere or whatever. It was like that because like those caterpillars obviously have silk.
Yeah, they have
right?
silk. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Oh.
so I remember laying out cut blocks with that. With the
I would never.
the caterpillars hanging down, and you're kind of
Oh,
swimming
no.
through them with your hands.
No.
trying to get through. It
My
was
waking
interesting.
nightmare. Just like wear a trash bag. Just try to seal yourself up so they can't like crawl under your clothes. So
But
nasty.
mountain pine beetle. They had plans. They did a lot of pine reduction blocks. So when it was getting close, when it was already in Alberta, but it was getting close to certain FMAs and stuff, or it was already in there and was starting to spread, they would go through and all of their annual allowable cut, where it would have been put into a diversity of species, it was focused on pine to try and limit that loss.
I spent like 3 years focusing on pine layout.
Right, because they're going to die anyways.
As far west as we could get it, basically up into the slopes.
Right, and there was a big fear that they were going to get into the Jack Pine stands of Saskatchewan, which was the next thing. And they were talking about like it could make that jump.
Yep.
Right? It's a little bit of a ways, but they could totally do it. And so that was a concern. We're trying to stop it, just trying to protect the resource. And like these trees are going to die anyway, so they went through and they cut as much pine as they could to try and limit their food resources, and it worked.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, we got some colder winters, which helped. All of a sudden,
Yep.
that was the big thing, is we were having mild winters, and the mild winters didn't allow, or the cold didn't penetrate the trees enough where the beetles live to actually kill them. And it needs to get really cold for like a long time to actually kill them. but we didn't have that for a while, and that's what allowed the population to spike. But then we managed to do a bunch of cutting and a bunch of management, and we got some colder winters. We got lucky, kind of like fires. We just you get lucky with the weather, and that's your biggest thing, right? And so the pine beetle epidemic there's still pine beetle going through a lot of places in Alberta. I'm not saying it's like totally stopped or anything, but the majority of it has slowed. Like, it's definitely not as pressing of an issue as it was. But yeah,
a big concern with the pine beetle is what happens after it goes through a region. So you get a lot of standing dead, and within 2 or 3 years, those trees have completely dried out, but they're still standing. So they're perfect vertical matches, just waiting. They still have all their branches, so they've got great ladder fuels. There was some of that happened at the Fort McMurray fire with a spruce beetle kill that went through years previous, and so they had a lot of standing dead tried spruce trees. And the same thing happens with pine beetle. So we're seeing a lot of pine beetle right now in Jasper and Banff. Like, it's in the passes right now. I'm seeing like we went there for our work trip, and there's lots of red dead in the hills, which means again in 2 to 3 years there will be new red dead as it spreads, but there's going to be standing dead trees. So I really worry about fire in the passes in the next 5 years.
Yeah,
I think that's our next Fort McMurray. That's our next Slave Lake.
Yeah, which is why they're worried about why they're doing more prescribed burns in the foothills and the mountain regions, right? Because they are super worried about that, because there is a lot of dead pine there, and they need to take care of that.
You don't need to burn the entire mountain range. What you have to do is you have to burn strips that create blocks. So that if a fire is coming in from BC, or if it's coming out of Alberta into BC, it hits a piece that's recently burned in the last 5 or 10 years, and it's not a productive fuel type, and it drops the fire intensity.
A relatively large piece.
Yeah,
Because you need to think about spotting and all kinds of stuff, right? So, yeah.
At Fort McMurray, they were saying that it was throwing firebrands and starting fires more than a kilometer ahead of the fire.
Oh, yeah, easily.
Not
a problem. Like, they've recorded them throwing firebrands like multiple kilometers. Like, it's not hard, especially in the wind. Like, it's when they're big enough that they're creating their own weather, their own updrafts and stuff. Like, it's not hard for firebrands to go a long ways, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So mountain pine beetle. It made headway. We kind of got lucky, as well as managed it correctly, and I think the epidemic is kind of under control in that sense. But yeah, cool. What else we got here? We got demand for lumber. I don't know. That's a meh.
I mean.
Has it changed much? This guy wanted to know, has the demand for lumber changed much over the last 50 years?
With the housing market crash, the demand went down.
Oh yeah, it went down temporarily, but it comes back up. Like, it's relatively speaking, like, this guy was talking about strategically, or sorry, that's the wrong thing. Like the boom and bust of like the oil and gas industry and like that kind of stuff, right? Because like they're very boom and bust. It's always like, okay, awesome, we're doing really good. Like, everybody go. They throw money at problems.
They hire everybody in their job.
Everybody, and they overpay, and then all of a sudden, the economy crashes, and they fire everybody, and nobody has jobs, and they're way down. And that's not forestry. Forestry is much more sustainable. Yeah. It's lower profit. It's much more efficient. Like, forestry. The forest industry would not function without maximum efficiency. Like, that's if you can save 1%, like, you're a hero. Like, they're constantly finding ways to lean out the process and cut the fat. Because it needs to be done, because like it's not like
it's only so profitable. There's only so much money in the trade, right? Like,
and it takes, like we said, it takes 80 years or 100 years to regrow our product. So it's just a slow, steady progress. It's not a boom and bust industry. It does go down. It does like go up and down, of course, just like anything does with the economy. But as far as like relative to like oil and gas, then no, nothing like that. Yeah. Like, always when the oil and gas hits the fan, forestry's always there, right? So it's always there in some capacity. Some mills do close. But they tend to reopen, and
The big thing is, if demand gets really high, they raise the prices. Like, the stores will raise the price, and then that curbs demand. Yeah. If it's like, oh, I'm going to build, a really big garage, and then you look at the cost of the lumber and you go, okay, maybe I'll just do 2 cars. And, maybe I want this extension, or I want that, or I'm going to build this, crazy luxurious thing. And they go, oh, maybe I won't. And so, I mean, companies and developers, they're not going to build crazy luxury things when building supplies are high, right?
Yeah.
So they can put off that project for a few years until the price adjusts. And
Yeah.
the thing about our annual allowable cut is it's fixed. So if the price of lumber is crazy high and it's a great time to be making lumber, too bad. You get your annual allowable cut.
Yeah.
And then when the housing market crashes and you can't give wood away, too bad. You have to cut that wood and you're putting it out at a loss. So the idea that like forestry companies are these huge megalomaniac, you know, just slaughtering machines, just crushing the landscape, it isn't totally accurate.
No.
We have to work with the good economy, and we still have to.
Well, I think that's kind of disingenuous a little bit, though, just saying that they're putting it out at a loss. Because, like, for example, if a mill closes, obviously it's not going to be cutting wood.
No,
right? So,
but
like,
it just immediately gets bought out and incorporated into another mill.
Well, sometimes, but like for example, like Toko and High Prairie, they finished building their mill, and before they even fully got it to 100% operation, they shut it down because the collapse happened in 2008, and they only just fired it back up. They're just starting to fire it back up now.
Yeah.
So that they never really got operational. That's why that happened. But yeah, basically what Derrick's trying to say is that it's just the AAC is. The amount we cut is not based off of the economy. The amount we cut is based off of what the landscape can handle sustainably without stress, and just like it's not a problem. It's a non-issue. It's good to go.
Yeah.
You want to answer a funnier question?
Sure.
So you guys doing drugs?
Yeah. See, this is funny. So I went back to look at this, and they deleted this comment. And I was like, "Of course you did. That's the right choice." But what they had asked, so I kind of had to put it together, the gist of it. But it was essentially like, "Oh, so you're just like out there smoking weed all the time? Like you're just like a bunch
of
like
stoner's paradise."
Yeah, and it was essentially that. And I was like, do you mean planting camps?
Yeah.
Like, do you have a friend who plants trees?
Yeah. Nobody. I promise you, there's nobody in the forest industry that's getting high and writing forest management plans. Like, that's not happening.
Oh, yeah. Be like, yeah, see, I'm production focused doing AVI here in the office. So my favorite thing to do is smoke weed and kill my productivity by 70%. Like, and then we're subject to drug testing. Usually a lot of employers will do it to start your employment. And then you usually are subject to random drug testing or drug testing triggered by an event like an accident on company time. Yeah. So at no point do you want to have any amount of anything in your system, because that's your livelihood. Just bang, done. Yeah. We are professionals. Yeah. You know, you wouldn't expect your doctor to be able to like light a spliff and then cut you open. Yeah, exactly. You know? So I'm not allowed to try to sustainably manage a forest resource while I'm thinking about how great Looney Tunes is.
Yeah. Although tree planters, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if my job was to monotonously every day put 2 to 5,000 holes in the ground and put trees in them, I think... Yeah.
This isn't a planting bed. This is slamming a metal shovel into like gravelly, rocky, terrible ground. So I think at some point it's just a pain management. Like they're just so sore every day. They're just like, I just need this joint so that I'm not visibly crying all the time from how my body feels.
Yeah, planting camps are an interesting spot. Those people work their asses off.
Yeah,
they earn every dollar they make. Because
I'd like to make fun of them, but it is the toughest job.
It's not very few. I've met a few people in university who were very gung-ho. They were like, yeah, I'm going to go. Like, what are you doing this summer for summer work? Like, I'm going to save the world. I'm planting trees. And I'm like, really?
You poor.
So and I kind of gave them a little bit of an education on what that exactly means. And I never did follow through. I don't really know them, but I don't know if they follow through with it, but it's not a joke. Like you have to work your ass off for months on end, and you sleep in a tent, and it's
you
cold,
don't get to shower, or you shower
wet.
like once every 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's not for the faint heart.
No.
Yeah, you definitely need to be a badass to pull that one off for sure. So and they do it.
And the veterans make good money. They've been at it for a few seasons, but they're doing that at the cost of their body. You're shredding your knees, you're shredding your shoulders, your elbows.
Those guys that do 5,000 trees a day. Ugh. Those are 5,000 good trees.
Yeah,
they're not J rooted. They're not going to get pulled out easily. They're going to survive.
I should explain. So J rooting is when the tree has a bit of a plug where all the roots are at the bottom of it. So when you create a hole and you shove the tree in, if you do a bad job of it, it kind of pushes the bottom of the plug up and it makes like a candy cane shape, like a J.
Upside down,
Yeah, and so the bottom of the roots that want to grow down are now facing up.
Yeah, and
so they grow poorly, or they die, or they just never really establish properly.
Yeah.
So it's a big problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
So that was managed to turn the "Are you doing drugs?" question into an actual answer.
Yeah, no,
Congratulations.
I remember in the Reddit post, I was like, no, absolutely not.
This one's pretty good. Did you just like paraphrase all these?
No.
Oh, you just
that one about the drugs was the only one I paraphrased.
Okay.
The rest are just copy paste.
Gotcha. How badly damaged are logging areas after operation is finished? Are reclamation efforts enough to return the lands to its former state, or is further work needed in your opinion? So when we do logging, for the most part, I think the majority of the logging done in Alberta and Canada is done, well, especially in Alberta, where we're not in the Shield. We don't have there's not a lot of rock. We do a lot of winter harvesting. Yep. So that means everything's frozen. So any machines going over the cup block or over the forest, there's not a lot of soil compression going on there because it's all frozen already. There's not they're not stirring up anything, so they're not really breaking up the mosses or the grasses that
you're not rutting.
Not rutting anything. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of that is maintained, and when a winter logging is done and they pull out of there, and they may need to plant or something like that. Like some of the planting, like if you have to have a hagland in there or something like that might rut up a little bit, but that would just be an in and out thing. They wouldn't be repetitive compression.
It's not every log truck digging a foot with its tires.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all well taken care of, and it's those blocks come back. You could go back to almost any cup block in the province, and 5 years later, and you go, oh wow, like this, you got like it's super, like especially if it's a deciduous forest, like you wouldn't be able to walk through it.
No.
It's going to be so thick. Like it's wild. When I was out hunting, actually, there was not just this year in general, all the trees, all the spruce stands I've walked into that have been productive spruce stands, they've got like 70 centimeter leaders. So a leader is the very top piece of the tree.
Like that year's growth.
It's literally that year's growth. And there've been 70 centimeters, which is not common.
No, that's wild.
There should be like 15
for
to 30
a conifer,
centimeters.
that's outrageous.
So there's 70 centimeters. Some of them were pushing a meter. Like there were some wild ones out there.
Yeah.
But so it was a good growth year last year, I guess. But there's not a lot of damage done. So if the damage done that is done by harvest operations is generally the roads.
Yep.
And like water crossings are a big concern.
Any ecological spills, like if you had a machine that blew a hose and was leaking things, and all that gets spill kits and dug up.
Yeah, and those happen.
Or
so
fuel leaks.
You have operations on the landscape, there's going to be problems, like machinery breaks down or whatever, right? But it's not like they just like let the oil spill out and leave it. Like they take care of it as if it is a tanker spill. Like it's well taken care of. They dig it up, they make sure it's well, and they reclaim it back to the way it should be, right? Like our number one priority is to make sure things are natural and the way they're supposed to be. They're not affected or turned or
we didn't strip all the topsoil off.
Exactly.
There's still some vegetation of some kind. There's retention left into the block where you deliberately leave trees behind.
Yeah, for sure,
for value. So I mean, there's even when we leave an area, the biggest areas of compression, which is a big problem for plant growth because roots can't grow well when the soil's very compressed. Those are the roads. So even in winter, you'll get soil compression on the roads. So the biggest thing we do when we leave is we have these huge spikes at the end of bulldozers, and we drag them through the compressed dirt, and it tears it all up. And then after like a year or two of freeze thaw cycle in those cracks, it really breaks it up.
Oh yeah.
And they've even found that trees planted on the old roads, because they've been torn up and they've been so loosened, they're actually growing better than the stuff.
They grow really well. There's some road sites that are like, you can tell when you're walking through it, like an older cup block, say it's a 20 or 30 year old cup block, you're walking through it, you can tell when you hit the road because all of a sudden you can't, there's like this wall of trees that you can't get through and you have to try to weasel your way through it, right? So like they're really good at reclaiming the stuff that does need to be reclaimed, but for the most part they're left virtually untouched. Like they're like, besides the fiber being removed, the ground is fine. Like those species are still there. Like they don't get torn up. They come back. They're good to go. So
there's water course crossings. So you're not dragging logs and stuff across creek beds or running tires right over where a fish would swim.
No.
So small creeks get log fills. They get dirt caps. The whole
really
thing.
Small creeks get log fills.
Yeah,
really small, and that's only in wintertime.
Yeah, and so creek is not even the right word. Like an ephemeral.
Yeah.
With no defined channel.
Yeah. And no flowing water in it.
No flowing water gets a log fill.
Yeah. But like,
and those have to be pulled out by spring.
Yeah. And then there's the culverts. There's very stringent regulations around crossing size and like how big it has to be for the channel width, and it is above and beyond what needs to be done. Like it's very, very well taken care of, because it's a huge priority for forestry companies and for even oil and gas and stuff to keep those.
And you got to keep the dirt out of the creek.
Yeah, got to keep the integrity, right? Because it's super important.
Don't destroy the channels and keep the dirt out of the creek. Those are the two big things.
Yeah.
And we're not allowed to modify creek channels in any way. Yeah. So when you hear about creek crossings or we're putting culverts in and stuff, we're not allowed to disturb the creek bed. There's no digging. There's no rerouting of things. I know large mining operations can reroute whole creeks and things like that to keep their sites dry. Forestry doesn't get to touch or modify creek channels.
Even if we wanted to, we don't
It'd
have
be
the
so
funds
expensive
to
reclaim that. It's just no, we're not mining diamonds. We can't pay to put the creek back to equivalent value.
There's no the purpose. Like it isn't. Yeah,
no, it doesn't give you an advantage.
No, and it just ruins the integrity of that piece of land, right? Like
so our reclamation is just reforestation and making sure that our roads are pulled out properly, and also for access. Another reason to rip the roads up, and they often throw large stumps and large pieces of tree and stuff over them so that you can't drive a pickup down them. Yeah, and that's to limit poaching access and public access, which can cause problems with erosion and other things. So
yeah. Do all men in your crew have beards? Funnily enough, we both have beards.
We do.
Yeah, it's pretty common.
It's super common.
I don't know if that's a result of being in forestry, or if people with beards are drawn to forestry, or if you know what I mean, if it's an action or a reaction.
That lumberjack
I'm not sure.
programming.
I think it's more of a reaction. I think it's like, man, beards look good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they've definitely come back in style. I remember when I was a teenager.
Lumbersexual.
Lumbersexual. Yeah, and everybody had shaved faces and stuff, and then it just seems recently that it's like, oh yeah, beards are in again. So, yeah, no, are you wearing plaid right now?
Maybe.
Yeah, there it is. I have a lot of plaid work shirts. I have heirloom plaid, I call it. They're actually my grandpa's when he was doing forestry. He was doing communications, like back when it was like pseudo military.
I like how serious you've made this question.
Yeah, I have heirloom forestry plaid and a beard. This is a big deal.
Please, you don't even know.
Oh, did you buy yours at Walmart last week? Let me tell you about the time my grandpa was working a fire with communications and wearing this shirt. Like, oh, you think you're forestry? You think you can hang? Like, no.
Yeah, we're getting to the end of the questions here.
Plaid hipster.
So you don't have to deal with our bullshit anymore.
Nothing I've said is bullshit. How dare
this one? I don't know. How much wood could a registered professional forest technologist chop if a registered professional forest technologist could chop wood? That was a mouthful.
Yeah, no, it was.
I'm really proud of myself for getting that out.
You did a good job. You didn't stutter or flub. Yeah, there was lots of
question. They're all bullshit questions. It's Reddit. Reddit's full of just it's just jokes, nonstop jokes. The fact that you actually got serious questions amazes me.
There was there were some people that were like, "Oh, I'm actually doing a case study for coming out of high school, going into college, and I need information on this." I was like, "Perfect. Timing works out great." And then there are people that there's questions on that list you're not even reading.
Oh yeah, the last one's good too. Have you ever seen a bear shit in the woods?
I've never seen it actually do the duty. I've seen bears.
Actually, I have. I literally just saw one in September.
Saw it actually pooping.
I saw there was 7 bears in this block that I was sitting on this hill overlooking this cutblock looking for elk.
Brown bears, black bears.
What's that? Black bears.
Black bears.
Yeah, there was a sow and 4 cubs or 3 cubs. I forget now. There's 3 or 4. It was a lot. I remember because I saw the sow. I watched the sow for like an hour, and the cubs were so small I couldn't see them through the grass. But like I think 3 or 4 of them, anyways. And then there was like some other ones off, and like I'd seen at one point I saw. Sorry, it wasn't 7. I saw 5 different bears in the same. Like it was insane.
5 bears too many.
I remember. Yeah, I do actually remember seeing the sow take a dump.
That's awesome. At least you can say that. Be like, I can confirm that indeed they do shit in the woods.
The old, like a dog when they just like they hump up and they got their back all hunched and just like, yeah, it was pretty funny.
I've seen a video. There was a guy that chased a brown bear out of his yard, and he gets it kind of to the side of the house where the fence is really narrow to the house, and the camera goes around the corner, and the bear just sits there and just takes a huge dump and then jumps over the fence.
Yeah, so you have seen a bear shit in the woods.
I've seen a bear shit in someone's backyard on a video on YouTube. It's a far cry, but
anyways,
I've seen plenty of bear poop in the forest.
Yeah, there you go. There was our fill-in podcast, our
Ta-da.
random things.
Ba-na-na-na-na-na. Pulled it out of our ass.
Somebody took something useful out of that. That was 15 minutes. Man, we're getting good at just, making stuff up.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just kidding. We're not making this stuff up. This stuff we understand. But there's so much detail into all of these questions that I could literally take all these questions, except for, the stupid ones like, beards and shitting in the woods. And I could probably bring on a guest that would have a full hour worth of conversation to talk about invasive species.
But instead you brought me.
Yeah, all this stuff. You brought yourself, let's be real.
Oh, it's true. You didn't fireman carry me across the threshold or anything.
But anyways, so that was
that was a podcast.
That's episode 12. If you guys got any questions, which with this episode I'm sure you will, like, why didn't you answer the question that you stated? Because we just kind of sidetracked.
Why did you immediately hit a tangent?
Yeah. But you can email me at yourforestpodcast@gmail.com. I have a Facebook page now, Your Forest Podcast.
Oh shit!
Check it out. I got to make a LinkedIn page and Instagram and all that social media. I'm not a social media fan. I don't. But like now that I have this, I'm trying to promote it. It becomes a necessity. Unfortunately,
you can do it. I say enthusiastically. It's
says the Facebook troll.
Yeah. Troll. No, I am a proud keyboard warrior, but a troll I am not.
Okay. Anyways, but thanks a lot for listening, guys. And I got some good ones coming up. I got some more caribou stuff, some different caribou perspectives. And a bunch of other things that are in the works. So keep on listening. You're gonna get lots of good information, lots more specific topics with specific professionals who know specifically about those specific situations.
And then some non-specific stuff with me.
And then some random shit. This podcast, I think we've sworn more than any other podcast, though. Gotten more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
We definitely might have to dial that back a bit.
Sorry about it.
I don't know. I'm not. We're all adults here.
I'd hope
Are we
so.
kidding? Are we pretending that like we don't
What
swear in a regular
13-year-old
life?
cares about this?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
If you're 13 and listening, congratulations.
They're still making episodes of
curve.
Pokemon. What are you doing here?
Anyways. All right, guys. Thanks for listening.